In episode 48, I answered listener questions about the paranormal. Now I'm sharing some stories I haven't shared on this podcast or in writing before, and some of them might just creep you out. Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicolle, and on this episode, I'm celebrating spooky season by sharing some stories I haven't published anywhere before. But first, I have a few short announcements. On Tuesday, October 25th, I'm participating in Wake County Public Library's Haunted Carolina program with George Mathis, the founder of Inspire, the group that I'm vice president of, and our friends in the Ghost Guild. This is my 10th or 11th year doing the program, and I'm always happy to be invited back. Since COVID hit, we've been holding virtual presentations, so this is a live Zoom event. Check the link in the show notes for more information. Second, I want to thank every one of you for listening. October 7th was the second anniversary of my launching Peep, and I wouldn't still be here if I didn't have your downloads as encouragement. Your listening and feedback over the last 2 years has meant a lot, and it keeps me going. That said, podcasting is not for the faint of heart. It's truly a labor of love, and every year when the renewal for the platform comes up, independent podcasters have to make the deliberate decision to keep going. It takes time, effort, and money to produce a show. And while I'm too proud to beg, I'm not too proud to let you know that if you'd like to financially support the podcast, I've added a yellow donate button to the website at peeppodcast.com. Any amount you can give will go toward covering the hosting platform fees, marketing materials, Zoom subscription, and equipment. In return, you'll have my utmost gratitude and a place in my prayers. Many podcasters rely on Patreon, and I set up an account with them almost 2 years ago. But my guess is that my listeners aren't excited about a monthly subscription, so an option for a one-time donation through PayPal seems the best way to go. In the future, I may add advertising to the show to help cover my cost, but I'd prefer to try this route first. Lastly, if you're in the Triangle area of North Carolina, you are invited to my book signing at Heyday Brewing in Raleigh on Tuesday, November 1st from 6 to 9. I'll have Please Don't Call Me Psychic, The Tritium Hypothesis, and its sequel, which is my newest book, The Dark Season, for sale. I'll do a short reading from The Dark Season and toast its release. Even if you don't want to buy a book, just come out to a great little brewery and have fun on a Tuesday night. In case you can't make it, my books are available on Amazon, and I'll put a link to The Dark Season in the show notes. As we creep closer to Halloween, and as we start my 3rd year of producing the Peep Podcast, it seems an appropriate time for me to share some of my paranormal encounters. These are encounters that I've had that did not make it into my book. These events didn't happen on official investigations or even unofficial investigations. They're just little occurrences that I've learned to take in stride over the years. And I think you might find some of them interesting and even a bit creepy. Way back in 1999, I drove a little red Isuzu pickup. It was a fun vehicle with 2 doors, a manual transmission, and no air conditioning. It was hot in so many ways. Just kidding. Anyway, that's back when I was hanging out with my psychic friends, as I call them, and learning to get a handle on my empathic and intuitive tendencies. One weekend, my friend and I were driving from Raleigh to Charlotte to take a Reiki 1 course at another psychic friend's home. When this particular friend and I would get together, paranormal things always happened. Our energies seemed to draw everything to us, and sometimes that was good, and sometimes it was a little jarring and even unnerving. We were somewhere between Greensboro and Charlotte when we stopped for gas. It was getting late in the evening and heading toward twilight, but it wasn't dark yet. We went into a convenience store to use the facilities and grab snacks before getting back on the road, and when we got back into the truck and got settled, I could feel our excitement to get back on the road building. So I started the truck and pulled forward, and when I glanced into the rearview mirror, I screamed. There was a man's face in the back window of the truck. It was drawn and gray, and he looked like he was probably in his 20s, maybe. And he was in the bed of my truck looking in the mirror back at me. Only he wasn't. I stopped the truck and turned around, and there was nobody in the bed of the truck, and nobody near it. My friend never saw anyone, but she said she had felt like we were being watched when we got into the truck. When I thought through what I had seen, it was a rare time when I saw an apparition with facial features. He seemed rough around the edges and up to no good, not just because he surprised me by being in the mirror, but because he had an intensity in his eyes that was scary, and I don't use that word lightly. We said a prayer and told him he was not allowed to ride with us, and then I put the truck back in drive and left that place in my dust. A few minutes down the road, we both agreed that the energy felt lighter, and he was gone. That weekend, I was initiated into Reiki and learned how to use that energy to help others. And we had a few other paranormal experiences with the rest of our psychic friends, but none as dramatic as that one. Around the same year, the guy who eventually became my ex-husband was in a band that practiced in a space down on Capitol Boulevard in Raleigh, near the railroad tracks as you're heading downtown. Next door was a big old factory type of building that was being converted into high-end condos. I was at the practice space pretty often, and I always felt a darkness emanating from that old building. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, but the feeling was persistent. One night I had a dream that I walked into the opening where the main doors would eventually be into that factory. It was vast and dark and empty, and I looked way up high into the rafters and saw a man hanging from a short rope. He was dead, and I knew it. I woke as soon as I saw him. Not long after that dream, they started selling those condos, and a friend of my brother moved into one on an upper floor. My brother told me as soon as the guy moved in, ghostly things were happening, and there was a rumor going around the building that someone had hung himself in the space when it was a factory. That seemed proof positive enough that my initial feelings and my dream were spot on. Several years later, I was divorced, a newly minted meteorologist, and living in Minnesota. I worked as a broadcast meteorologist for Weather Eye Radio Network, and I loved my coworkers. One became like a little brother to me, and at some point we were talking about my ability to walk into a place and tell if it's haunted. He was living in an apartment that had some spooky activity, so he asked me to check it out one day after we got off work. I followed him over there, and as soon as I walked in, I knew he was right. He had a male presence that definitely wanted to be noticed. While we were standing in his small kitchen, I could feel the spirit was paying close attention to me, and then the unexpected happened. I can only explain it as if an ice-cold, and I mean truly frozen, hand reached right through my right shoulder. I shook violently from that shoulder through the rest of my body, and my friend saw that reflexive reaction. I didn't let it scare me, though. I just looked at him and said, "Yeah, you've got an active one, all right." I think after that, we left his place and went to have a much-needed beer at a local brewery. I will never forget how cold that hand was and how it literally felt like it went completely through my shoulder. I don't know if the spirit meant to be that brutal or if he was just testing to see if I could feel him, but it was incredible and icy. The next story happened a little over 3 years ago. Someone I love deeply was in the hospital and had been very ill for quite some time. Now, if you know me, you know hospitals are one of those places I try to avoid because as an empath, they can be overwhelming. Between stress, sorrow, fear, and physical pain, there are so many negative feelings that you can experience there that I just avoid them as much as I can. And this is coming from a girl whose mom was a registered nurse her whole life. Anyway, because I love him, I would visit him when I could. I would try to just keep my psychic walls up as much as possible. Only one time, while I was with him in his room, I let my walls down. He was sleeping and I was praying and trying to figure out if there was anything I could do to help him. Reiki, yes, but at that point I hadn't practiced in a long time and I wasn't very confident. Sidebar, silly me, because you never lose the gift once you have it. But I digress. So, with no other ideas, I just sat and prayed. And then I went home. But before I could leave the hospital, I had a reminder of why they are not my favorite places. I was walking from his hall to the elevator. There was a group of about 6 people standing in front of it, talking as if they knew each other and facing the elevator doors as if they were all awaiting its arrival. I was about 30 feet away and slowed my pace because I didn't want to ride with a group that large. To my surprise, the elevator doors opened, and the group split up and walked in opposite directions down the hall, away from the elevator. It was as if they'd never planned to get on, so I quickened my pace and made it to the empty elevator before the doors could close. I was surprised I made it in time. I got in, pushed the button for the first floor, and watched the doors close. And then I felt it. Someone was standing behind me, to my left, staring intently. I had that sensation I get in the middle of my back when a spirit wants my attention. I wasn't prepared nor in the mental space to deal with it, so I ignored it. And just as the doors opened on the first floor, I whispered, "You're not allowed to follow me home. You need to stay here." I'm sure I looked a little crazy, whispering to myself as I swiftly walked to the exit, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be away from the spirit and on my way home, alone. One last story, and it's a quick fun one. In July of 2020, my guy and I were supposed to go on a tour of Switzerland. Obviously, we couldn't go because of the pandemic, so we settled on a long weekend in Charleston, South Carolina. It was my first trip there, and it was lovely. On our first night, we ate at a restaurant near the cruise ship docks, and then we walked down to the park area facing the water. We sat on a bench and just stared at the water as the sun went down. There was gravel under the bench beneath us, and a concrete sidewalk was in front of us. I was just lost in the moment and enjoying every bit of it. Suddenly, I heard someone rush up on the gravel behind me, as if they needed attention. Reflexively, I turned around to see who it was, only to realize that nobody was there. But just a foot behind the bench was a retaining wall, and grass, not gravel, above that wall. I immediately realized that it was either a spirit or residual energy that I'd picked up on, but I had to ask anyway. "Did you just hear someone run up behind us?" He said, "No," and I was thankful, as always, that he didn't call me crazy. These are just a few examples of what life is like for a sensitive person who has the gifts of empathy, intuition, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience. As I've gotten older and learned from my psychic friends and books how to control them, tap into them when I want to, and block them when I need to, my experiences have become much more pleasant most of the time. At this point in my life, I try to limit my exposure to potential negative aspects only when I'm doing investigations. And even then, I do what I have to protect myself. I hope you've enjoyed my stories, and maybe I've inspired you to share some of yours with me and your fellow listeners. Please reach out through the contact form at peeppodcast.com if you have stories to tell. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. You can be as anonymous as you like. While you're there, sign up for my new newsletter. I'll only email it once or twice a month, max, so no worries about being spammed. You'll receive briefs on recent episodes, information on any upcoming appearances I might be doing, news, and some additional fun stuff. In fact, I'm taking requests for what you'd like to see included. You can keep up with the show on its Facebook page, facebook.com/peeppodcast. And if you enjoy the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app. Share it with friends and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Doing so will help the podcast be found by others. A huge thank you to everyone who has given the show some love. I truly appreciate it. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, financial support, or any other way, I absolutely appreciate your being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.